Hey, welcome back to the Roy Boy Productions YouTube channel. This is my 1963 Ford Galaxie 500. This year marks the 20th year I've had this car. And for the vast majority of those 20 years and the vast majority of the nearly 100,000 miles I put on it, it was just me, by myself. And if I needed to take a drink with me, I just set it down in the seat between the two sides of the bench seat, and it rode fine. It was great. A few years ago, though, that all came to an end. You see, I met a stalker, and then I ended up married to her. But now the single cup holder doesn't work, and I've got to come up with a better plan. So I was kind of sitting in the car one day a few months ago as I was trying to get it brought back to life. There'll be a video about that later. And I realized the dash had two perfect spots that if you just turned them on in, they'd work pretty well as a cup holder. So I phoned a friend. And that friend is my good buddy, Flat Top Bob on Instagram, the owner of Owens Salvage in Wellington, Texas, Bob Owens. Turns out Bob had a 63 Galaxie in stock at his salvage yard. He pulled the gauge cluster. He met up with me at the Stray Cat 500 show in Dewey, Oklahoma, the first weekend of May every year. And I now had a new center console, or so I thought. I should back up just a little bit. You see, when I decided to put a dual cup holder in the car, a couple buddies of mine were like, oh, just go on Amazon and buy those ones. It's already there. It's got a cubby hole. It's got cup holders. It's got the foam spot, everything you need. Those are ugly. They don't share any design philosophy with the interior of a 63 Ford Galaxie. They just don't look good. Sorry, Dad. So after setting the stripped down gauge cluster bezel, whatever you want to call it, on the transmission tunnel hump, I decided, hey, this is probably going to work. It's just a little too wide. I just didn't want it pushing against my legs and making it uncomfortable as I drove. So I decided to take 4 inches out of the middle. And as old Puddin would say, I just use the old slicer dicer, whatever, however you says it. Yeah, just a cutoff wheel. Just cut 4 inches right out of the middle. It's pot metal, so there's really no easy way to weld it back together unless you buy this stuff that you have to have shipped in. It's basically brazing it back together, and I'm impatient. So I literally just went down the street to the hardware store, grabbed some JB Weld, and slapped it back together. Put a couple zip ties around it to hold it as a clamp, and check it out. It's going to work. So the next stage is, how do we support the thing? How do we make it so it doesn't teeter on the transmission tunnel? It needs a base. After talking to a couple different upholsterer friends of mine, I decided I was going to try my hand at making one out of aluminum. Because, you know, we restored a vintage camper a few years ago. I know my way around some aluminum. I'm not very good at that. After a week and a half of trying, I came up with a pretty ugly version of how this thing was going to look. I was kind of happy with it. I mean, overall, the concept was fine. The execution was garbage. So I phoned a friend. Crown Custom 1 on Instagram is my buddy Corey Conyers of Crown Customs here in Wichita. He is a premier builder across the world of front-engine dragster bodies, and actually he's built a couple whole cars, I believe, if I remember right. But just metal craftsman, aluminum body craftsman. And I said, hey, can I bring this over to you? He said, sure thing. We take it over there, set it on his workbench. He looks at it for about a second and a half, sets it to the side, grabs a fresh sheet of aluminum, and starts over. It was hot garbage. It was not good. So 3 hours later, he's got this fully formed piece that's tigged together, and it's perfect. It fits like a glove. All right, well, thank you, Corey. That's two friends that have helped me get this thing done. Guess I didn't do it all myself. The next problem was it was ugly. The top of it, the red part was ugly. It was, somebody had painted it 2 or 3 times, and it was flaking off, and it was just not good. So I phoned a friend. Called over my buddy Adam Brownfield. He's got a shop here in town that works on aircraft stuff, but he has a blast cabinet. So I went over there, and he set me up with his blast cabinet. I blasted the whole thing off. And while we're talking that evening, I told him about the JB Weld and how I didn't know if it'd be strong enough. He pulls out this 3M panel bond. He was using to work on his own car or something. Puts it on there, and it's way stronger now. It's holding solid. And I'm like, great, I think that part's done. And I wanted to put on some Roth Metal Flake, so you can get that in a spray balm. But again, I'm impatient, and I don't like to wait for stuff. So I went over to a different hardware store, and I bought some metallic black primer, some metallic black paint, glitter paint, and a clear. And I went to town on it. And it didn't turn out too bad. This part I did myself, and I'm like, it's not terrible. It's not really good, but it's not terrible. For a test, I put it in the car, and I headed off to Colorado for the Hot Rod Rock and Rumble. It's about a 1,000-mile round trip from Wichita to Colorado Springs, and then the long way we took back. And it was great. It worked great the whole way. The only thing it's missing is where the speedometer used to be. I need to make a plate that sits in there. That way stuff doesn't fall down into it. But it worked great. So we're up there in Colorado. We're getting a photo shoot done for my buddy Rhino built with a overland camping vehicle he's built out of a new Subaru wagon. He happened to be up there as well that weekend. So we shot pictures of that for Tread magazine. And we did that right in front of my buddy Dominic Olson's shop, which is Big O Fabrication. And I was needing some material to wrap the aluminum part just to make it tie into the interior better. Remember that part earlier, like things actually look like they belong. So technically I phoned a friend again. And I said, hey, man, do you have any material that looks kind of like this? I sent him a couple pictures. He goes, I got tons of different leftover pieces of material. Just come find one that looks right, and we'll cut you off a chunk. He goes, that's a tiny little piece. It's not even going to take a yard. Don't worry about it. So while I'm there, I'm grabbing different samples and taking them out to the car. And I get one, and I lay it on there, and it looks pretty good. I take a picture of it, take it back into a shop. Now, I'm parked about 150 yards from a shop where we're doing a photo shoot, and I just, rather than move the car, just walk back and forth. I come in, I show him, so yeah, I think this is the one that's going to work. And he goes, well, here's just one more. So he pulls one more out, and I'm like, I don't think that's it. He goes, just go lay it on the seat and check it, see how close it is. So I go out there, lay it on the seat and check it. By the time back, he's already sewing up the previous sample into something that fits. So he recently finished up interior on a beautiful Merc for Pot of Gold Customs Springs, and the bill on that interior is worth about 3 times my car. So very awesome to have him do a little work. So he's sewing this thing up to fit, and I didn't expect him to do it for free. I was going to try to give him some cash for it. He and his wife Angelica would not let me do that. So I now have, 4 different friends that helped me get this thing done. But it's now done, and it's great. And the whole point of this whole thing is could I have done this all myself? I probably could have. Would it have looked this nice and been done this quickly? No, by no means. No means whatsoever. And sometimes it's okay to phone a friend, to ask for a favor, to get something done to make your car a little bit cooler, a little bit more what you want. Now, you don't have to do the exact same thing. Even if you have another 63 Ford Galaxie, there's probably 1,000 different ways you can make a cool cup holder, and it's going to work great. So I'm just going to encourage you to look at your car, look at the shapes that are in there, look at the designs that have already been used on it, and see if you can come up with something that looks like it belongs in your car when you're doing new speaker grills or building a whole new interior or changing the seats or putting a center console in for a cup holder. Whatever you do, make it yours and go enjoy your ride.